watercolor Christmas cards. I've got a colourful wreath tutorial for you in this video. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Michelle. On this channel you'll find all things watercolour and a little bit of mixed media too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the bell icon, you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make one free video a week here on YouTube on a Thursday with extra content on Saturdays for my Patreon subscribers. Now today we're making Christmas cards and I've got a lovely colourful wreath tutorial for you. I'm going to put a nice big red bow on it. Now if you're interested in the materials I'm using, I'm going to be explaining about the cards as I go along and various options for making cards in watercolour, but I'm also going to tell you about the paints. Now I'm using a small set of limited edition colours that I've put together with Jackman's Art Materials here in the UK. So you can purchase the same paints as me if you would like to do so. I'll put a link in the video description, but you can also use any colours that you like, and I'll be giving you alternative colours so that if you've got lots of different brands or if you've got one other different brand, you can find similar colours in your own brand. So I'll be talking about each colour as we go through, but be aware that you can also just do any colours that you like, because after all it is Christmas and there are no rules. Now if you are interested in the paints I'm using, that limited edition set will be available until the 31st of December, and there's worldwide shipping, so you can order from anywhere in the world. I'll put a link in the video description. If it's past the 31st of December, this is 2020, you're watching this video in a year's time, you're still interested in the paint colours I'm using, you can pop over to Jackman's website and you'll still be able to buy all of those colours individually. So they'll still be available, it's just that the limited edition set of them all together won't be available, but you can still purchase them if you would like to. As I said, I'm going to give you colour alternatives as we go through, but if you want to do your wreath in pinks or purples or anything else, feel free to do that. I'd love actually for you to pop over to my Facebook group and show me the results. So feel free to do that. I'll put a link on the screen. Hope to see you there. So let's get started and let's look at the first stage of the tutorial. So first up, we're going to draw our design. Feel free to use stencils or to draw around things. We're going to use some circles and there are all sorts of things you can use. I'll explain as we go through. Anybody can draw this. It's really, really easy. So let's talk about what to paint our card design on now. I've got this pack of Bockingford watercolour cards, really lovely. They've got this decal edge, haven't even opened it yet. I'm going to level with you, I never buy these. I always just cut up pieces of watercolour paper when I'm making cards and just sort of do my own. I've also got a decal edge that I sometimes do along the front edge of my cards. So you do not have to have ready-made cards like this. Any watercolour paper is perfectly capable of being made into cards. Now the reason I have this is because a friend of mine recently emigrated to France and he left me a ton of art materials that he didn't need anymore and didn't want to take abroad, and this just happened to be in the box, so that's why I have these. But as I said, all you need to do is find yourself an envelope, cut a square, make sure that one side of it is slightly smaller than the envelopes you're going to use, probably about 5mm, 1/4 of an inch all the way around. You can score the halfway point by using the wrong side of a scissor blade and you're good to go. You can also use a decal edge scissor if you like to. Another option for you if you want to make lots of Christmas cards, you want to get almost like a production line going, what I sometimes do is just stretch a huge board of paper and divide up into little squares, maybe the size of this label here, and I literally paint a design in each square, and then at the end I cut the squares out, and then you can just stick them onto ready-made cards, which do not of course have to be watercolour cards. Now if you're doing it that way, what you need to do is choose some kind of glue that's not going to make your paper buckle. So if you've made little designs and you're going to stick them onto your cards, you have three options really. So your first option is spray adhesive. Your second option is double-sided sticky tape. That's probably the most secure. And your third option is something like a Pritt stick. So you don't want that wet glue. You want those glues that are not going to make your paper wrinkle. But for the purposes of this tutorial, and just because I happened to find them yesterday when I was going through all the stuff my friend gave me, I'm going to use this ready-made Bockingford card. So I've taken my card from its envelope and you can see I've stuck it down a little bit to my drawing board just so it doesn't move around. Now because we're painting on dry paper with this tutorial, you shouldn't get too much paper buckling, so it's fine just to do this. Be aware that with this masking tape I did stick it to my clothes several times because I can't tell you how many times I get beginners telling me that they're tearing their paper with tape. So masking tape is a bit too sticky for your paper, so you want to get something like a jumper. I've got my green jumper I'm wearing, and I've been sticking this tape to my jumper to pick up a bit of lint so that I reduce the sticky by about half. Now I want to find the center point of this paper so that my wreath doesn't end up over to one side or the other. Of course, this is going to vary depending on the shape of your greetings card, but I'd like to find a center point. Now I could just measure from here to here and divide in half. Another way of finding a center point, and that gives you the exact center of the paper, is to take a straight edge from corner to corner like this, and then you'll be able to make a cross in the middle. I'm keeping my pencil marks really, really light because I want later on to be able to rub them out. So I've got a center point here. I think I'd like my wreath to be slightly higher than center. So what I'm going to do now is take a right angle from the base and go up like this. And that will give me an idea of where to place my circle. Now I've got this stencil, very handy, full of little circles, but don't worry if you don't have something like this. There are bound to be lots of circular things in your kitchen that you can use, and for the smaller baubles, we're going to use one of these in a minute, you can just use a small coin. Now the circle I'm going to draw is actually going to be the middle part of the wreath, so the wreath's going to go around the outside of the circle, not through the middle of it. So we want that to be fairly small so that we have room to make a nice big wreath. So what I'm going to do is take this one here, and we're going to put it on the top half of that center point rather than starting dead in the middle, because I do want this wreath to sit slightly high on the greetings card. So I found the middle point and I've got a nice guideline. What I'm going to do now is to draw a bow. So I'm going to do the center of the bow, which is just a square with sort of slightly curved edges like this. You see I've gone up a little bit, and then we're just going to curve round like this, come out a little bit. So sloping those sides out a bit like that. And then we're going to take some ribbons down. Try to let the ribbon just flow naturally. Don't try and control it and get it exactly symmetrical, because it'll look much nicer if it's uneven. So there's my center circle. Now I've got a nice bow. Going to get an eraser and clean up any mistakes and any lines that I no longer need. I'm also going to get rid of those guidelines because we don't need them now. The sooner you can get rid of pencil marks, the less chance there is of trapping them under your paint. So we've got our center mark, we've got our circle, we've got our bow. Now I'm going to put some baubles on here. So I just want some circular shapes. I'm going to use this stencil. As I said, you are welcome to just use some little coins or something like that. You can vary the sizes of them if you'd like to as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to go round the outside here, but where we come close to the ribbon, we're going to go behind it. Let me start with this one here, like so. So I'm going to do a few of these larger ones. So don't forget, a wreath is fairly natural, so you don't have to get these, you know, all in line around an exact circle. And you see how I'm just taking them so that they sit in places behind the ribbon. And now I'm going to do some smaller sized ones. So I think we'll have this size 13 one here, but you could of course just use various sizes of coins. Now I'm not going to stop everything dead at the edge of that circle, but also I'm not going to go too far into it so that we maintain some kind of order. Do make sure you leave some space here because we're going to have some other things in here as well. We don't want to cover up every little bit of drawing space. So just stopping to have a look at it now, I think I'll have one more down here and perhaps one over here. So now we've got some baubles. The next thing I want to do is to draw some stars. Now, if you're not confident about drawing stars, you can download something from the internet and make yourself a little cardboard stencil, and then you can draw around them all. Or if you've got something like those little gold stars that teachers stick into notebooks, you can use those as well. Just put them onto a piece of paper and then cut them out so they're not sticky, and then you can just draw around. But I'm going to draw mine freehand. So generally with this sort of star, we have 5 points. So mine aren't perfect, but I think they'll do. So usually you start by drawing the top point, come out in straight lines like this. You can overlap them as well with other things, and then we'll come in like this, and then you want 2 more points to the star like this. So I'm going to carry on round, infilling some stars. These stars are going to be gold later on, so they're going to look really, really lovely. And this is the last thing I'm going to draw, because I'm not going to bother drawing the green leaves, because I think we can manage to do those freehand just by using the shapes that we make with the brush. So once I've filled in a few more star shapes, that will be the drawing part of this tutorial finished. So now we've done our drawing, we're going to put some pale blue-green leaves in the background, and this is the only colour where we're going to mix two colours together. So I've got this phthalo green, and I've also got this which is called Ocean Blue Shimmer. So it doesn't sound a very Christmassy name, does it? But it's actually a perfect colour for Christmas, and it's also got some sparkle in. So we're going to mix those colours together and get a lovely pale sparkly blue-green. Now, if you don't have those colours, let me give you some alternatives. So for your green, you want a strong green, so any of the phthalo greens, or perhaps emerald or viridian. And for the blues, you want a turquoise blue, so any of the phthalo blues, or you could use something like cerulean or even a touch of Prussian. So I've finished my drawing. As you can see, things are just placed randomly. You want it to look fairly natural. Now, it doesn't matter if the stars are in front of the baubles or the baubles are in front of the stars. It doesn't matter which way around that is at all, but do make sure that everything goes behind the bow. So in other words, if you're drawing a bauble or a star, don't take it over the edges of the bow. Just stop it so that it looks like it goes behind. I've also taken an eraser to this central circle, and I've just faded it a little bit. I still want to be able to see it, but I don't want it being too dark. So what I'm going to do now, and I don't advise you to mix your paints over the top of where you're working. I'm only doing this so that you can see it on camera. So I've got some of this blue shimmer paint. Now, it doesn't matter if your paint doesn't have shimmer. Of course, shimmer paints are pretty, but you can do this with any blue. And then I'm going to get a little bit of green. What we're looking for is a pale blue-green. So if you want a pale colour, you generally need to add quite a lot of water. So we're just going to keep adding the green until we tip it away from blue and slightly into the green end of the spectrum. I'm going to add a bit more water there. Now, we don't want to go too dark with this layer because we're going to put much stronger green on top, so I'm going to add a little bit more water. We're going to get kind of a fern type background effect and want to do it all going in the same direction as it would be naturally if you made a wreath from greenery. You would weave things in one direction, so that's what we're going to do. So all I'm going to do now is take some of this green behind and in between these things that we've drawn, and we'll just come out naturally at the sides. So get something like this going on. And what I'm going to do is, as I get to the centre here, in the middle part of the wreath, I'm going to actually fill in. So we're going to end up with a broken edge, but filled in behind, like this. So you're going to make sure that you get that broken edge there and here, these natural looking shapes. But then as we come into the middle part of the wreath, we're going to block everything in so that there aren't any white gaps in our wreath. We're going to put some snow on at the end, but we want that to go on top of the underneath colours. So I'm just filling in here. It will look a bit flat in the middle at the moment, but once we get that second shade of green on, this will just sit nicely behind. Now, some of these stars and baubles are going to be quite light colours, so we want to get as much greenery as we can around the edges of them, like that. So what we're ending up with is a broken edge around here and around the outside, and filled in paint in the middle. So I'm going to continue now and work all the way around until I've got this effect right the way round the wreath. I'm going to be careful not to go over any of the baubles, any of the stars or any of the ribbon. Please don't panic if you go slightly across the edge of things, because the metallic paints tend to be rather opaque anyway, and we're working light to dark, so if you make one or two mistakes, trust me, nobody will notice. It's absolutely fine. So we're going to go on to painting some darker leaves now, and we're going to use the same green but just use it on its own. Do remember when you're following this tutorial that I am letting things dry in between, so it's going to be really tempting for you just to carry on because you watch this tutorial and one thing just comes after another. But do remember that the video is being edited and cut, and I am letting things get bone dry in between. You'll have a much better result if you let things dry. So we're going to go on now and do our darker green leaves. So now that's dry, we're going to use the exact same green, but we're going to use it alone. And you can see that I've mixed it much thicker and stickier here. One of the things that's not often known about watercolours is that the more watery the mix is, the more likely it is to bleed, even on dry paper. So we're going fairly thick here. I want strong colour that's going to cover that underneath layer. I'm still going to go around the bow, but in places I'm going to allow these leaves just to touch across the top of some of the baubles and stars so that we start getting a really layered effect. Now this wreath is already quite wide, so I don't want to go much further out with it. I'm just going to take some sort of round shaped leaves. And you see how that thick dark paint is easily covering the underneath layer and not bleeding out. Now it's really important that underneath layer is dry before you start this. Again, what I'm doing is working in one direction, so we get this idea of the wreath spiraling round, And of course in any wreath you would have naturally large and small leaves, so let's do that. You can do holly leaves if you want to. They are quite tricky to paint. You probably would want to draw them first. Don't be afraid of going over the top as well of previous areas. As I said, you can go across the top of some of the stars and baubles now, but don't overdo it, otherwise you'll completely cover them up. So for most of them, probably just stop at the edge like this. Just allow the leaves to go over occasionally. Here, for instance, let's just take it so it tips over the edge of that curve. And we're going to keep building up now. So we've got lots and lots of these green leaves. You can also allow them to tip over the edge here and here, but as I said, the wreath is already quite wide, so I don't want to do too much of that. Try to imagine as you're painting how the shape of the leaf would go behind things and perhaps emerge from the other side as you keep working in and building up those darker coloured leaves. So I'm going to continue round and add lots and lots of these nice dark leaves now, and then we'll be on to the more colourful objects. So next up we're going to paint the baubles, and I've got the blue again, and I've also got this fantastic bright silver. So we're going to be painting some of the baubles blue and some of them silver. I'm going to leave a little light highlight too, so they look a tiny bit shiny. At this stage, if you're enjoying this tutorial and getting some value from it, please could I ask you to click the like button. So if you could just give the video the thumbs up. If you like, share, subscribe, or leave me a comment on YouTube. YouTube will push this video out to more people. I'm very grateful to all of you who watch me here on YouTube. So there's my dark green leaves finished. Now don't skimp on those, do take time over that stage. The more you can get in, the better it's going to look. And although I roughly had them going in the same direction as the first layer, now and again I just took one in the other direction, because don't forget, with natural things you want the effect that they're kind of growing in all directions. Now that's dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the baubles next. I'm going to do some blue and some silver. I think for me I'm going to do the large ones blue and the smaller ones silver. So I'm going to start with the blue ones. Now when things are shiny they have highlights, so what you could do of course is put a little bit of masking fluid on if you use that, but I'm just going to leave a little highlight as I paint. So I'm going to put some of this blue out. I don't want them too dark. I can always put another layer on them later on if I find that they are too pale. So I'm going to start fairly light. And this is a shimmer colour. Now you may find on camera that you don't really see the shimmer. Unfortunately that's the thing with the metallics. They don't tend to show up on camera. Hopefully once I get onto the gold and the silver, which are a lot more metallic, you will be able to see that shimmer. So the shimmer in the blue is a little bit more subtle. And you see I'm just leaving a tiny highlight there and painting round. As I said, if you make any mistakes in something like this, it isn't really going to show. So don't worry too much. And let's get this one done as well. So painting round any objects that go across the top. So I've got the ribbon coming through on this one. So I'm just going to have it peeking out from behind, and again leaving that tiny white highlight. If you can't paint round a highlight like that, there are other options. Not only is there masking fluid, but you could also put it on afterwards if you wanted to with the white paint. I'm going to keep the white paint for splattering for my snow, so I think the highlights will look a little bit more realistic if they are just left for white paper. Now light normally comes from one direction, which is why I'm putting all of the highlights over the same side. Now if, like me, you're doing a red or a purple bow, be sure to paint that last of all, because colours like red and purple, and of course purple contains red, very prone to bleeding when you paint next to them. So you want to put those in last and not be trying to paint around red that's smudging as you go through. So that's the large blue baubles done. I'm going to go on now and work with this lovely bright silver, painting with it fairly thickly. Just going straight from the pot there. Again, these metallics will show up less on camera than they do in real life, but I will try when the card is finished to video it moving around a little bit, and hopefully then you can see how well these pretty colours catch the light. So all I'm going to do now is finish off painting these baubles and then allow them to dry. Next up we're going to paint the gold star decorations, and I've got some pearlescent gold. It's a really beautiful colour. You can use any kind of gold paint for this, including acrylic paints, but if you don't have anything with shimmer, you can of course just use something like a yellow watercolour. Something like Indian yellow or a warm cadmium yellow will still give you a slight gold effect. You can always add a bit of glitter or a bit of sparkle afterwards. So now I've got my metallic gold shimmer paint, and I'm going to paint the little stars. Now, I'm working straight from this little pot of paint here because I'm actually only going onto white paper. But if you're working on areas where there are different amounts of wet paper, if you're working wet into wet or something like that, you never want to be dipping back into the pot because you'll just pollute it with other colours. So apart from the red bow, the overall effect of this wreath is going to be quite light and icy and delicate. You could, of course, do this in much brighter colours. But once we splatter the snow on at the end, I think it's going to give it that real icy look. So I'm going to carry on here and paint all of these stars with my metallic gold paint and then let it dry. So I've left it almost till last. We're going to paint the beautiful red bow now, and then at the end we're going to put some snow on top. So do make sure that once you've painted your red bow, you let it dry. Now I'm going to be using Alizarin Crimson, which is a beautiful, strong, pinkish red. However, you can use any dark red for this, including things like cadmium reds, madders, any bright red at all. So now we're going to paint the bow in the centre. I've got this Alizarin Crimson. Now the paint I've mixed strongly, and yet I haven't done it too thick, not as thick as the green leaves, because if you mix a red, a pink or a purple too strong, you can actually end up almost covering up the colour. You don't allow the white of the paper to glow through. Now I do want to put a few darker details on the ribbon, so I'm just going to put an underneath coat of red, and then we'll put those darker details on afterwards. You can see that I'm spreading the paint quickly. I've got a fairly big brush because I don't want a load of hard drying lines. I want this bow to look as if it's made from really luxurious flowing ribbon. Just painting around smoothly, and it's really going to bring this wreath to life. So we have got a tiny bit of bleeding in the edges there from some of the greens, but I'm actually going to use the green paint in a moment to put the shadows on the red, because green and red are opposite colours, so we can mix the green with the red to get some darker shadows. So I'm going to let that dry, then I'm going to pick out the darker details on the ribbon, and then we're on to splattering with the snow. So what I've done here is I've taken the rest of the red and I've mixed some green in it, and because these colours are opposites, one will dull the other one and darken it. So can you see what we've got here? We've got this lovely dark colour that we can use for shadows on the ribbon. So just with the tip of my brush, I'm going to carefully go around these areas here. We want a little bit of shadow and definition. We'll go underneath here as well, so that we get shape to our bow. I'm also going to take this dark just down this inner edge. It'll give us some shadow and it'll cover up any of those areas where the green bled in slightly. The thing with making Christmas cards is you're never going to be on very expensive paper, so you will get things happen like bleeding, but it's absolutely fine. We're just going to add that definition in with this dark colour. Just going to take this down the lower edge of these top bits as well. And that's really improved the look of that ribbon. So finally, I'm going to splatter with some white paint to get the effects of falling snow. However, this is optional. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to mess it up, then you don't have to do this bit, but I think it's going to look quite pretty and always been a risk taker. So I have this tube of titanium white. Now, if you do buy this set of limited edition paints, or if you go onto the Jackman's website afterwards, you'll be able to buy either in a tube like this. If you buy in the limited edition set, you'll get the little pots, you'll get a pot of white, but if you buy it later on, you'll probably get a tube like this one. Now, this is titanium white. So titanium white is actually more often used in gouache, so it's a really, really strong opaque white. If you have a set of watercolours, you may have zinc white. It's not quite as opaque, but it will still work. Or of course you can use something like white ink or acrylic, or you could even use a white gel pen and actually place your little snowdrops on if you wanted to. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to show you a way of splattering that's really quite safe. I'm going to give you some instructions so it doesn't just go everywhere. So it's time to do the white snow splatter. And do make sure that everything you've got is clean. So the white paint should be clean, the brush you're using should be clean. Doesn't matter if it's old, if it's been used lots of times, that's fine. Just make sure you've rinsed it out and dried it so it's nice and clean, and your water should be clean. You want to get maximum drama, so we need that white paint to be as pure as possible. Now I've squeezed some paint out here, you can see from the tube. If I were to dip in like this, it wouldn't be wet enough to splatter. However, I don't want to make it too wet because then we dilute the paint and we don't get a pure white to it. So I'm going to dip my toothbrush in and just add some water like this. So you're looking for your paint to be mobile but not overly watery. I think I'm going to add a bit more paint to that. Now, splatter doesn't just go anywhere, there is a way of controlling it. So what you want to do when you dip in is you want to be pulling your thumb backwards like this, so that if you pull backwards, the splatter will go forwards, and you want to be aiming your paintbrush down. Now, if you were very determined that the white paint shouldn't get on anywhere except that wreath, what I would do is mask around the edges. In other words, get some newspaper with a nice torn edge around there and cover up everything else if this card was dark, for instance. But because I'm on a white card, I don't really mind if it gets a little bit wider out than the wreath. If you don't have the manual dexterity to pull your thumb back like this, if you have arthritis or something like that, it's easily done. What you have to do is just get a something like a blunt knife blade and draw it backwards. You can use that instead of your thumb, but I'm able to do this, so I'm going to just draw back like this. I'm going to hold it a little bit up first of all and start to flick. And we're getting quite a subtle effect here. Don't want to overdo it, so I am happy with that. And now I'm going to let my card dry. So here's the finished card, and really pleased with those effects. And you can see, hopefully if I turn around there, you can see those lovely metallic paints. Just to mention at this point that I do have an offer on my latest online course, that's Basic Watercolor Techniques for Beginners. So at the time of issuing this video, you can buy the course on pre-order for quite a large discount. The link is in the video description. If you pop over to the Thinkific site, what you can do is you can register for free. All you have to do is put your email address in, and you can watch some of the introductory videos and see if the course is for you. If you're watching this video in a few weeks' time, that offer will be finished. But by registering on the Thinkific site, you'll receive offers by email of any future discounts I have on upcoming courses. So do let me know in the comments how you got on with this tutorial. As I said, you're welcome to pop over to my Facebook group. I know that the members there would really love to see your work. So I'm trying to do at least one Christmas card tutorial a year, if not more. I do have another tutorial that you might enjoy where I made a beautiful little snowy cottage. If you would like to see that one, you can watch that video right now.